almost about 5% odd. But this is the time where we get our focus on specific stocks as well. Prashant, what are you looking at?
China, right? I mean, you said you wanted to travel to China, right?
No, I said people don't want to travel to China, despite China being open to it.
At least for inbound, it's open, but outbound, still no clarity. So, on Market Lazer today, what we're doing is we're looking at what China has done. Now, this came yesterday evening, and this is important. We've been talking about how cases in China, COVID cases in China, as their reopening is exploding. But China has officially downgraded the effective risk level of COVID from level 1 to level 2. They've got a 5-tiered system, and this is basically effective from 8th of January 2023. Now, let me quickly tell you what these measures are in terms of what they've done. The new measures require only necessary treatment and measures to curb the spread, and the focus has now shifted to control severe cases. Things like centralized quarantine, those visuals, right? I mean, container boxes and absolute extreme isolation, identification of close contacts, categorization of risk areas, all of this has been removed, has been done away with. The new rule also applies to inbound travelers. Now, this is where it gets interesting. That is for people traveling to China. This is also from the 8th of January next year. What they require when people travel to China is only a negative PCR test within 48 hours of departure. But there is no requirement for quarantine at designated facility or PCR test upon arrival. This is a major step in terms of China's reopening, especially, as I said, to the rest of the world, from the rest of the world's perspective. And this comes, as I said, despite the recent spike in local infection cases. By the way, on a national level, China is no longer counting cases, right? So that should give you an indication of the trajectory or the path they want to be on, which is reopening. The change is, of course, in line with expectations, but the pace of it, I think, is ahead of expectations. The impact could be big. China is the second largest economy. It's about 10% of the world GDP. It's more than that in terms of a percentage of world trade, at least before COVID. Now the economy is opening up. Number one is oil prices, right? I mean, oil prices could get a boost. They've been drifting upwards slowly for the last couple of days. Many have pointed to, oil experts have pointed to, people like Ed Morse, etc., from Citi, China reopening is a big one for oil prices. So worth watching this. We are a big importer. We want lower prices, not higher. But that's one potential play. Of course, I mean, there are specific stock implications like ONGC, etc., which could benefit. But on an overall basis, you want oil prices lower, not higher. Metal prices are another one, which could get support. After all, China is the biggest consumer of all commodities, pretty much all commodities. Portfolio flows, which is FII flows, global flows. China, remember, is still the largest constituent in the MSCI Emerging Market Index. Its weight has dropped from its peak, and India's has gone up quite a bit from its lows. But even still, will global emerging market funds see strong inflows? Generally, more recently, China's gain is seen as India's loss. But remember this, it's not necessarily the case. When global emerging funds see inflows, the flows go into global emerging market funds, which are then allocated according to a passive index like MSCI Emerging Market Index or whatever, right? Benchmarks, basically. And all countries get inflows when global EM funds get inflows. So that's at least history. We had, I think, someone from Bank of America the other day who made this point very forcefully. The narrative that China's gain is India's loss somehow, I mean, that is not true. When global funds get flows, all emerging markets, proportionate to their weights, start to see inflows as well. So just, a few things, a bunch of things to keep an eye out on. The big one, according to me, is oil prices and what happens as China continues its reopening.
Okay, well.